Vin Diesel had built his empire on one simple philosophy: work hard, and life will pay you back. As the head of his own company, he compensated his workers fairly but demanded nothing less than complete commitment in return. What happened beyond office hours wasn't really his concern until one evening changed everything. That night he spotted Maria Evans, a devoted single mother and one of his most reliable employees, nervously asking for leftover food in the company cafeteria. Something about her embarrassed secrecy troubled him deeply. Acting on impulse, Vin decided to quietly follow Maria to her home in the Bronx. What he discovered there would completely reshape his understanding of what it really means to work hard and what success should actually look like. Vin Diesel had spent his entire career believing in one fundamental principle: hard work always leads to success. As the founder and CEO of Diesel Transport Inc., he had transformed his logistics company into one of New York's most powerful enterprises. Coming from Brooklyn's toughest neighborhoods, Vin understood struggle intimately. He'd built everything from the ground up, relying solely on determination and relentless effort. This personal history shaped his business philosophy completely. Every employee received fair compensation, but Vin expected absolute dedication and peak performance in return. His favorite saying echoed through the company halls: "Sweat never killed anyone." This motto had become the heartbeat of his professional world. It was well past normal business hours when Vin sat in his sophisticated Manhattan office, glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline. The building had mostly emptied, leaving only the quiet sounds of maintenance crews making their rounds. While examining quarterly reports, movement in the distant employee cafeteria caught his attention. Stepping closer to his glass wall, Vin peered down the empty hallway to see a lone figure hovering uncertainly near the closed food service area. He immediately recognized Maria Evans, one of his most dependable yet reserved staff members. Maria never caused problems, rarely voiced complaints, and often volunteered for additional shifts when needed. Vin remembered she was raising 2 small children alone, though this detail had only briefly crossed his mind during a past meeting, before being forgotten in the rush of daily operations. From his elevated position, he watched Maria approach the night kitchen staff member. Their exchange was quiet and uncomfortable. Though Vin couldn't hear their words, the body language spoke volumes. Maria's hesitant gestures, the cook's brief pause, and finally the sympathetic handover of a food container. Maria quickly slipped the small package into her weathered bag, nervously scanning the area as if terrified someone might witness this private moment. The sight of her anxious secrecy deeply disturbed Vin. Why would someone as hard-working as Maria, someone who put in more hours than most, feel such shame about taking home a simple leftover meal? Unable to shake what he'd witnessed, Vin made a spontaneous choice. He grabbed his coat, abandoned his paperwork, and discreetly followed Maria from the building. The night air hit him with bitter cold, instantly transporting him back to his youth, those days when he wandered empty streets wondering where his next meal would come from. Maria hurried toward the bus stop, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion, rather than cold. Vin hung back, maintaining distance while wrestling with guilt over this invasion of privacy. Yet something deeper, a growing sense of responsibility, compelled him forward. When the city bus arrived with its familiar screech of brakes, Maria boarded without hesitation. Vin found himself stepping on behind her, taking a rear seat under the harsh fluorescent lighting. From there, he quietly studied her profile. The vacant stare out the window, the deep fatigue carved into her features, the kind of weariness that rest alone couldn't heal. As the bus rolled away from Manhattan's polished center, the scenery gradually shifted from upscale neighborhoods to the grittier reality of working-class areas. Vin felt his chest tighten as familiar landmarks disappeared, replaced by aging buildings, boarded storefronts, and graffiti-covered walls. These streets awakened memories he'd tried to leave behind, reminders that this harsh world had once been his reality too. Maria sat motionless throughout the journey, clearly used to this stark transition, unmoved by the deteriorating landscape. Around her, Eventually, she signaled for her stop and stepped off into the poorly lit Bronx streets. Vin followed at a distance, hands deep in his pockets, feeling increasingly uncomfortable but determined to understand what forces drove such a dedicated employee into these desperate circumstances. Maria navigated through shadowy alleys and past neglected buildings, structures showing clear signs of abandonment with peeling paint, rusted barriers, and trash-strewn walkways. She finally reached a modest apartment complex. Vin positioned himself in the shadows as she climbed the creaking staircase, unlocked her door, and disappeared inside. Through the thin window coverings, he could see the heartbreaking reality of Maria's daily existence. The apartment was virtually empty, a harsh space lit only by a single exposed bulb. A threadbare mattress lay directly on the floor with several plastic storage boxes serving as makeshift furniture. There was little else to suggest comfort or basic stability. Maria set down her bag with careful movements, despite her obvious exhaustion. Two small children, both under 6 years old, immediately ran to embrace her. Their faces brightened at her arrival, eyes filled with anticipation and hope. With practiced gentleness, Maria knelt and opened the takeout container. Carefully, she divided the meager portion between her children, ignoring her own hunger completely. From his concealed position outside, Vin watched helplessly, his chest constricting with overwhelming shame and guilt. Here was Maria, a devoted mother and tireless worker, unable to provide basic food for herself and her children despite her constant hard work. Then one child's soft voice pierced the silence. "Mommy, will we have food for breakfast tomorrow?" Maria paused only momentarily before answering in a calm, reassuring voice. "Of course, sweetie. Mommy always figures it out." Vin's heart broke at her quiet bravery, at the dignity she maintained even in such desperate circumstances. He suddenly understood with painful clarity that Maria's challenges went far beyond simple financial hardship. Her daily existence was a constant battle against deep-seated prejudices, societal assumptions, and invisible obstacles created by misconceptions about race, single parenthood, and economic class. Retreating into the cold darkness, Vin's mind raced with thoughts that shook his core beliefs. He'd always prided himself on operating a fair, merit-based company, confident that dedication alone could overcome any barrier. Yet here stood living proof of his blindness, a woman who embodied every principle he championed, yet remained trapped in unrelenting struggle. This revelation filled him with guilt and bewilderment. How had he allowed himself to remain oblivious to the human suffering quietly unfolding in his employees' lives? Returning to his luxurious penthouse that night, Vin felt restless and unsettled. He paced through rooms filled with comforts that suddenly seemed unearned. The image of Maria's children eagerly sharing a simple meal while their mother watched with silent pride and unconditional love haunted him relentlessly. His success felt empty, tainted by ignorance, privilege, and unconscious participation in a broken system. Early the next morning, still carrying the emotional weight of the previous evening, Vin stood motionless at his office window, staring at the awakening city below. Reports and statistics lay abandoned behind him, replaced by a new urgent understanding. He now realized that genuine success required far more than profits and expansion. It demanded empathy, accountability, and the bravery to confront inequality directly. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant peered in cautiously. "Mr. Diesel, Maria Evans is here to see you." Vin felt a surge of anxiety mixed with resolve. He hadn't summoned Maria, yet here she was, probably nervous and expecting judgment. Taking a deep breath, he turned to his assistant and nodded deliberately. "Please, send her in." Maria entered his office quietly, her steps careful but dignified, shoulders straight with strength forged through years of silent endurance. Her eyes darted nervously, briefly meeting his before focusing somewhere beyond his shoulder. Clearly, she anticipated criticism, judgment, or possibly termination, outcomes that experience had taught her were always possible, especially when Vulnerabilities were exposed. Vin gestured softly to a chair, his voice deliberately calm and reassuring. "Maria, please have a seat. I want you to know, you're not in any trouble." Her eyes narrowed with skepticism, yet she sat as requested, hands clasped tightly in her lap, preparing for whatever might come. Vin cleared his throat gently, struggling to find appropriate words to express how profoundly the previous night had affected him without sounding condescending. Finally, he spoke simply. "Maria, I need to apologize to you. I followed you home last night. I witnessed your living situation, saw your children, and observed how much you struggle. I should have recognized this sooner, should have been more attentive. You've exceeded every expectation we've set, yet we've clearly let you down." Maria's expression changed rapidly. Surprise, embarrassment, then a flash of anger as she processed his confession. Her jaw set defensively, pride rising as she responded firmly, "Mr. Diesel, I don't want charity, and I didn't come here for pity. I'm managing just fine. My children are safe, and that's what counts most." Vin raised his hand gently, trying to ease her defensiveness. "I'm not offering charity, Maria, and this isn't about pity. This isn't about what you need. It's about what you've earned. You've given this company more than your fair share. Now it's time for us to give back. Not just to you, but to everyone facing similar challenges." Maria's posture softened slightly, her shoulders releasing some of their tension as Vin continued. Earnestly, "I'm implementing major changes. Substantial pay increases, an on-site childcare facility, emergency financial assistance programs, and flexible schedules designed for families. But I can't execute this correctly without your guidance. You've experienced these struggles personally, and I need someone with your perspective to ensure we get it right." Maria hesitated, still cautious but clearly touched by the sincerity in his voice. For years, she'd fought against workplace invisibility, quietly battling assumptions and stereotypes about single black mothers, enduring daily prejudices disguised as innocent comments or casual judgments from colleagues who knew nothing of her private battles. Yet here before her sat a powerful man, openly acknowledging the injustices she'd silently endured. Gathering courage, Maria looked directly into his eyes. "Why now? Why me?" Vin leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, filled with raw honesty he rarely allowed himself to show. "Because last night, watching you sacrifice everything for your children, I saw my own mother. She raised me alone just as you're doing, and fought battles I never fully comprehended until now. She faced prejudice, judgment, poverty, things I've conveniently forgotten since achieving success. Seeing you reminded me that nothing has really changed, that hard work isn't always sufficient when the system itself works against you. I have the power to address that imbalance, and I need to start with my own company." Maria swallowed hard, her eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears as she whispered softly, "You actually mean this, don't you?" Vin nodded solemnly. "Every single word." Maria's rigid posture finally relaxed, tears quietly streaming down her cheeks as years of guarded resilience slowly gave way to rare, fragile hope. "You know," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly, "I've never let myself cry in front of my children, not even once. I've always told them tears are a luxury we can't afford, but hearing you now, I can't help it." Vin felt his throat tighten, deeply moved by her courage, her strength, and the burden she'd carried alone for so long. "You shouldn't have to be that strong," he replied gently. "Nobody should have to face alone what you've endured every day." Their eyes met briefly, a shared understanding passing between them, bridging lifetimes of different experiences through the common ground of compassion and empathy. After Maria left his office, Vin immediately called an emergency meeting of the company's executive board. As they gathered around the polished conference table, he presented his plans with clarity, firmness, and passion. "Starting immediately," Vin declared resolutely, "Diesel Transport will no longer measure success purely through quarterly profits or operational metrics. From this point forward, our success will equally depend on how we elevate our employees, how effectively we support their families, and how boldly we address the inequities we've overlooked for too long. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging doubtful glances as tension filled the air. Daniel Rosenberg, the chief financial officer, was first to voice opposition, his tone careful, yet unmistakably critical. "Vin, you're suggesting massive financial commitments. Pay raises, childcare programs, emergency funds. It's commendable, certainly, but practically speaking, how can we justify these increased expenses to our shareholders?" Vin met Daniel's gaze directly, his voice steady and unwavering. "Because our employees aren't disposable resources. They're the backbone of our entire operation. For too long, we've profited while allowing them to struggle in silence. What I witnessed last night in Maria Evans's apartment wasn't just poverty. It was a mirror reflecting our collective failure. Our employees deserve better, and frankly, we have an ethical responsibility that extends beyond profit margins." Silence lingered until Catherine Blake, the senior HR director, spoke thoughtfully. "Vin's absolutely right. The costs of turnover, training replacements, and productivity losses due to stress and financial strain far exceed the short-term investment in better wages and support programs. Long-term, this could dramatically improve our stability and profitability." Encouraged by her support, Vin pressed forward with renewed determination. "I'm willing to stake my reputation and personal compensation on this initiative. If the board remains unconvinced, I'll voluntarily reduce my own salary until we can prove these changes won't harm our profitability." A murmur swept through the room as faces that rarely showed emotion registered genuine surprise. Daniel looked, momentarily stunned, but finally nodded slowly, reluctantly conceding. "If you're truly committed to this path, Vin, then let's analyze the numbers and determine what it would require. But understand, there will be significant resistance from investors." Vin's voice carried no trace of doubt. "Let them resist. I'm prepared for that battle. I've spent my entire career believing in the power of determination and hard work. Now, it's time I applied that conviction to something greater than personal achievement." As the meeting concluded, Vin experienced a sense of purpose stronger than anything he'd felt before. For years he'd pursued success defined by wealth, accomplishment, and recognition. Now, inspired by Maria's quiet dignity and resilience, he understood that true success meant ensuring everyone had access to dignity, stability, and fair opportunity. Returning to his office, Vin stood silently at the window, gazing at the city below. He thought of Maria, her children, and countless others like her who fought invisible battles each day simply to survive. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, Vin felt truly alive, awakened by compassion and determined to use his position not merely to build wealth, but to transform lives. Over the following weeks, Diesel Transport underwent changes that sent shockwaves throughout the organization. Vin's announcements spread quickly, sparking discussions among employees and attracting attention beyond their New York headquarters. True to his promise, Vin moved swiftly, implementing wage increases, launching comprehensive childcare programs, and establishing emergency assistance funds for employees facing unexpected hardships. Initially, reactions mixed astonishment with cautious optimism, as many workers wondered how long this newfound compassion would actually last. But as days turned into weeks, skepticism transformed into genuine excitement and relief. Maria Evans became actively involved, working with HR to develop and refine policies based on her lived experience. She helped ensure each measure addressed real needs rather than offering empty gestures. Gradually, her coworkers' perceptions shifted. They no longer saw Maria simply as another quiet employee in the background, but as a respected advocate and leader who had courageously exposed painful realities many shared, but never dared voice openly. However, as internal atmosphere improved dramatically, external pressures intensified. Diesel Transport's investors and shareholders quickly learned of the radical policy shifts and reacted with immediate concern. Vin received countless calls and emails questioning his judgment, accusing him of undermining profitability and threatening to withdraw essential financial support. Daniel Rosenberg approached Vin again, visibly stressed, carrying a list of upset investors. Vin, you need to understand we're facing major backlash. Some of our largest investors view this as reckless, emotion-driven decision-making that risks our market position. Vin remained calm, leaning back in his chair and meeting Daniel's gaze with steady conviction. Daniel, I understand their concerns, but we built this company on determination and innovation. Now we're innovating again, this time in human capital. Let them judge us by our long-term performance. If investors want immediate returns without considering social responsibility, perhaps they should invest elsewhere. Diesel Transport represents more than just profit. Daniel sighed heavily, clearly conflicted but unwilling to abandon ship. Vin, you're gambling everything on principles. What if this experiment fails? Vin's voice remained steady and measured, his expression resolute. Then I'll accept full responsibility for the consequences. But let me ask you this. What happens when we succeed? We have an opportunity to completely redefine success, Daniel, and I believe in this with everything I have. His conviction proved contagious. Gradually, Daniel's skepticism softened into cautious acceptance. All right, Daniel finally conceded with a deep exhale. I'll support you. Just know next week's board meeting will be intense. When that meeting arrived, tension in the boardroom was thick. Vin took his position at the head of the polished table, facing expressions ranging from skepticism to worry to quiet curiosity. As he presented new data from recent initiatives, an unexpected picture emerged. Employee turnover had already dropped significantly, productivity had increased substantially, and preliminary employee satisfaction surveys showed overwhelmingly positive responses. Catherine Blake stepped forward with concrete evidence demonstrating exactly how these changes had positively impacted both employee morale and operational efficiency. Investors and board members began shifting uncomfortably as they realized Vin's bold gamble was actually succeeding. Ladies and gentlemen, Vin stated firmly, scanning the room with unwavering confidence, I told you before that success for Diesel Transport would no longer be measured by profit alone. Our strength lies in our people. These results prove definitively that investing in them isn't charity, it's strategic necessity. Silence lingered before Catherine Blake spoke again, her voice confident and unshakable. Not only are these initiatives morally correct, they're also strategically brilliant. Our competitors are now struggling to match our recruitment and retention rates. Employees across the industry are taking notice of our commitment. We've become a model for others to follow. Finally, the senior investor, Margaret Chambers, a formidable woman who had remained mostly silent, leaned forward thoughtfully and addressed Vin directly. I was among those who questioned your approach, Vin. Frankly, I wondered about your sanity initially, but I'm now convinced your vision is exactly what this industry desperately needs. You've reminded us all that profit and humanity don't have to be mutually exclusive. You have my complete support. Her declaration triggered murmurs of agreement throughout the room, signaling a dramatic shift. By meeting's end, despite initial resistance, Vin had secured unanimous board approval for continued expansion of these transformative measures. Stepping outside the boardroom, Vin paused and exhaled slowly, his heart lighter than he could remember. Catherine smiled warmly, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. You accomplished something extraordinary today, Vin. Not many CEOs would risk everything like that. Vin shook his head softly, humility evident. No, Catherine. Maria accomplished something extraordinary. Her courage gave me clarity. She showed me what truly matters. I just followed her lead. The story of Diesel Transport's transformation soon appeared in newspapers and across social media, thrusting both Vin Diesel and Maria Evans into the national spotlight. Media outlets sought interviews, asking both about their experiences, motivations, and how their partnership had sparked genuine change. Maria, initially hesitant about public attention, gradually found her voice growing stronger. She spoke openly about struggles she'd endured silently for years: poverty, societal prejudice, assumptions about her capabilities as a single black mother, and the dignity she'd always fought to maintain for her children. Maria's honest, heartfelt interviews resonated deeply across the country, igniting discussions about workplace fairness, systemic inequality, and the hidden burdens many Americans carry daily without recognition or support. Vin publicly credited Maria's courage as the catalyst for his awakening, reinforcing their unlikely partnership as a symbol of hope, resilience, and meaningful corporate responsibility. Over time, Diesel Transport evolved beyond being merely a profitable logistics company. It became a beacon of corporate integrity, a case study taught in business schools nationwide, demonstrating how compassion-driven leadership could coexist seamlessly with financial success. On a personal level, Maria's life transformed completely. No longer burdened solely by survival, she watched proudly as her children flourished, surrounded by opportunities she once thought impossible. The childcare and educational programs offered by Diesel Transport provided them with stability, security, and pathways toward brighter futures. Futures Maria had fought tirelessly to protect. Months later, during the annual company gathering, Vin stood before his employees, reflecting deeply on the journey they'd collectively undertaken. Maria stood beside him, representing not just herself, but every employee who had once felt invisible. "Today, we celebrate more than profits or milestones," Vin announced clearly, his voice resonant with genuine pride. "We celebrate dignity, compassion, and the courage to redefine success. None of this would have been possible without each of you, especially Maria Evans, whose quiet strength sparked a powerful movement within all of us." As applause filled the hall, Maria's eyes met Vin's briefly, silently sharing gratitude, mutual respect, and profound understanding. They had both journeyed far, from hardship to triumph, from ignorance to empathy, forever changed by their shared experience. For Vin Diesel, true success was finally crystal clear. It wasn't measured merely by personal achievement, wealth, or status, but by lives positively impacted, barriers courageously dismantled, and a world made better because someone chose to act with genuine humanity. Standing there beside Maria, surrounded by colleagues whose lives had been significantly improved, Vin knew without question that Diesel Transport's greatest achievement was no longer about transportation or logistics. It was about transforming lives through unwavering compassion, empathy, and purposeful leadership.